They won't take long. It's only a page. All right, so I decided to split up today's lesson into 2 days to make it a little bit shorter. Now, I will say tomorrow's notes are kind of long, so just kind of get prepared for that. But today's are really, really short. And so you should be able to finish the notes and the homework all in one sitting. So what we're going to do today is we are going to shift the vertical or the midline. All right, and so that's going to be your vertical shift. Now, if you think about your transformations back from Algebra 2, like on the poster over there, that up-down shift, that outside number, is going to be the same exact transformation, and because it's going to shift your wave up and down, it's going to basically shift your midline. So if you see a number on the outside being added or subtracted, that is going to shift your midline, and it should be the first thing you graph. All right, the midline is the first thing you are going to graph, and if you needed to state the midline, it is stated as y equals because it will be a horizontal line. We are going to use the midline like we use the x-axis in past examples, except that when you're talking about the x-intercept, they are still found from when you cross the true x-axis. So just because we're shifting the midline doesn't mean that your x-axis is going to get changed. Your x-axis is still when you're going to cross the, your x-intercepts are still when you cross the x-axis, not when you cross the midline. The max and mins can be found by adding the midline number to the amplitude for the maximum, or midline minus the amplitude for the minimum. And remember, when you're doing this, the amplitude is always positive. So if a question asked you for the max and mins and it didn't specifically tell you you needed to graph, that's kind of a shorter way of finding that out. All right, so on 25, we're going to graph, and then we're going to state the max and the mins. Now, the first thing you graph is the midline. So I'm going to do a little dotted line at +1. And I'm going to use that line like we used the x-axis in the previous examples. But I still need to figure out the amplitude, the period, and all of those things like we did before. So on 25, what would your amplitude be? 1, because there's an understood 1 right there. All right, for the period, it's going to come from the number inside. It is not the number inside, but it's going to help us find the period. So for the period, you're going to do 2 pi divided by that number, which is a 1, right? Understood 1 there too. So your period is going to be the regular 2 pi because there's no shift happening. All right, and this is sine. So sine is going to start at the midline, not at the x-axis. It starts at the midline, and it's going to end at the midline. And we're ending at 2 pi, so we're going to end right there. The middle point will be at the midline as well. So the middle point will be at pi. And then your quarter points are going to be at your max and mins, which is going to come from the amplitude. So this quarter point is going to go up 1 from the midline, and this quarter point is going to go down 1 from the midline. And then you can draw your wave. So I tried to be consistent in previous examples about saying midline instead of saying x-axis. So hopefully when we got to this point that y'all weren't stuck on trying to put things on the x-axis. So basically this wave just got shifted up 1, but the way you graph everything else is the same that we've been graphing. All right, for the maximum, what number would that be at? 2. And the minimum is going to be at 0. So if you think about your equation up here, for the maximum, we can take the amplitude, the midline, and add it to the amplitude. So midline plus the amplitude would give you the maximum, or you can take the midline minus the amplitude, and that would give you the minimum. So if you didn't have a graph, you could do it that way. All right, let's try 26. First thing you graph is the midline. Where's that at?
Probably negative.
-2. Then we're going to do the amplitude, which is 1. And then we're going to do the period, which is 2 pi, because it's not changing at all. There's still the understood 1 in there. All right, now this is cosine. Cosine has to start and end at the maximum. And so my maximum is going to be just 1 above the midline. And then 1 above the midline at 2 pi. And that's the start and the end of my wave. The middle point for cosine is going to be the other side of your wave, which is going to be 1 below the midline. And then your quarter points are going to hit your midline, and that's going to give you your cosine wave. So where would your maximum be at?
-1.
And where would the min be at?
-3.
And if you try to do this using the amplitude in the midline's at -2 plus your amplitude is 1, which would give you -1, or the midline minus the amplitude, which would give you -3. All right, last example for today, we're going to just put it all together. The first step is to graph the midline. Why are you not liking me? There we go. So where's my midline at? 2. So I'm going to do a little dotted line at 2. All right, second, let's figure out the amplitude, which is 3. And we got to figure out the period. So there is a number on the inside, so that is going to affect my period. So I'm going to take 2 pi divided by that number on the inside, and so my period is going to just be pi. So my guy is going to start at 0, but end at pi. And it's sine. So I can start at the midline and end at the midline. The sine starts at the midline, ends at the midline. Cosine will start and end at the maximum. And your middle point is also going to be at the midline. Your quarter points are going to be at the amplitude. So from your midline, you need to go up and down whatever the amplitude is. So in this case, it's 3. So right halfway in between these 2 points right here, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, put a dot. And then halfway between the other 2 points, 1, 2, 3, put a dot. And so this guy here is 1 period for the sine graph. If you came across a question that wanted you to draw more of your wave, or if you were to graph it in the calculator, it would just continue this pattern over and over again. So the points would be equidistant apart, and the pattern would just continue. So that's kind of the downside of using the calculator, is it's going to give you everything, and it won't tell you specifically what that last guy didn't go down all the way. There we go. It won't tell you specifically that blue period. It's just going to be all one color, and it'll just be all a wave. So you can use the calculator to kind of give it an idea of what it looks like. You know, obviously this one is going to cross through 0, 2, and it's going to kind of follow that little pattern there. But other than that, the calculator is not super helpful for graphing them. Does that make sense? Okay, let's look at your homework.
What does it mean by frequency?
That's the B value. That's what I wanted to talk about some of the things. So amplitude, period, vertical shift, you all know that. Frequency is just the number on the inside. So the frequency on this one is gonna just be 2.
And that outside number would be the vertical shift.
Yep, so -7 would be the vertical shift, 13 would be the period, or the amplitude, and then the period, you have to do 2 pi divided by the frequency, which is just pi. Which you don't have to write all that step out, you could just put pi if you want.
Can you do 2?
Okay, so what would your amplitude be?
-6.
-6, or just 6, it doesn't matter, but if you want to put the negative there, I'm fine with it. What's your frequency?
Pi.
Pi. What's your vertical shift?
Up
5, and then if you did 2 pi divided by pi, where would your period be? Just 2. Alright, and
Is the vertical shift
Why do you act like that?
you can put it on top of those things if you want, or you can put it underneath the cabinet there, wherever you want to find a spot.
Yeah, I don't know where the frequency. Can you do 3, 2?
It's
Would the frequency be 8?
Yeah.
8 pi.
8 pi.
pi,
8
and then
pi,
would it
0.
be
0 is the vertical
1/4
shift.
for the period, or no?
Yeah, 1/4
Yes.
for the period.
And then the vertical shift
Is
would
the
be.
vertical shift on number 2 just like on top?
It's 5.
Yes, it's in the front, and so instead of having it the +5 at the end, they put it in the front for just whatever reason. So just anything that's being added or subtracted on the outside, that's going to be your vertical shift.
Right, oh, we gotta write equations.
Yes.
Yes. It ain't that hard.
All right, so 4 through 11. Remember, your first step is to graph the midline. It doesn't tell you to state the midline because you should be graphing that on your graph. It does have you state the amplitude, the period, and once again, the frequency is just that B value, the number on the inside. So they're just having you state that to kind of help you take that step into finding the period. And then let's look at 12 through 17. You are doing a sine function on 12 through 17. It's going to give you the amplitude, the period, and the vertical shift. So basically the thing that you need to figure out is what the frequency is, or the B value, because that is the number that actually goes in the equation. And so the B value is going to come from 2 pi dividing by, and then whatever your period is. 2 pi is always on top. And so the number in your equation is going to be 1/2. And so your equation would be y equals 5 sine 1/2 x, and then down 4, so -4. Does that make sense? All right, and then 18 through 20, these are sine curves, whereas 21 and 23 are cosine curves. All of your curves are starting at 0. So we are not shifting left and right yet, so your starting point will start at 0. So like on this one here, you kind of see I did like the red dot. So that's your starting point, and then you do your 5 key dots after that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Y'all good?
Yes.
Awesome. If you have the homework passes that you want, because I'm going to put this quiz grade in, that's the last grade going in for the 9 weeks. So you should be able to see kind of what your 9 weeks grade is. So if you're curious about it, or you have homework passes that you want to use, you can bring those up to me today since we'll have some extra time. What's up?
I'll be doing my test grade thing right now.
No, you have to do it.
If you finish your homework, I'll let you do them.